crescent deity, which we know today has evolved into Allah, who was the son of the morning, or Ben Shachar. We have that teaching online on the radio page, in case you missed it. So we know here Yahweh is talking to S period, A period, Dan, through the personification of Melech Tyre, the king of Tyre. And we know the king of Tyre, or Saddam Hussein, or anybody who was the king back then, was not in the garden. Whoever Yahweh is talking to now was in Gan Eden. Whoever Yahweh is talking to now was in the Garden of Eden. Talk to me, somebody. And we know it's S period, A period, 10. Verse 14. Todah Rabba Yahweh. I said Todah Rabba Yahweh. Go back to verse 13. Thus saith the Master Yahweh to the Melech of Tzor. You have sealed up a pattern full of wisdom, chokhmah, and perfect in your beauty, Satan. You were in Eden. Stop. You were in Eden, the Garden of Eden. Now, not only in Eden, you were in the garden, in the land, meaning you were in the inner courts where I took Adam from the dust of the Temple Mount, what would later become the Temple Mount, and I created Adam. That's where you were. The king of Tyre was never in the garden. No human being was ever in the garden other than Adam v'Chava, Adam and Eve. There was nobody else in the garden. Here were the players: Adam, Eve, Satan, Yahweh. Adam, Eve, Satan, Yahweh. Those were the players. So this dude is none other. The king of Tyre is a personification, or a metaphor, or an allegory to speak of the one who is in Eden, the land of Eden. What part of the land? The inner court or the outer court? The inner court, the Gan, the garden of Elohim. Every precious stone was your covering. The ruby, the topaz, the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, the turquoise, the gold. The workmanship of your settings and the mountings was prepared for you in the day that Satan, that you were created, because you were the anointed cherub that covers, the Mashiach-like cherub that covers my glory and protects others from burning out from the brightness of my glory. And now don't miss this. And I placed you on the Kadosh mountain of Elohim. Amen. The Garden of Eden was on the Kadosh mountain of Elohim. How many times have we read that scripture and missed it? We think, oh, it's the mountain in heaven. Come, let us go up to the mountain in heaven. No! He says the Garden of Eden was on the earth, and it wasn't in Babylon between the Euphrates and the Tigris, as you and I have been taught. It was the very Kadosh mountain of Elohim. And you were there, I was there, Adam was there, Eve was there, and we were the only people that were there. There were no other beings there. Come on. I'll sit to that. Satan, you were in the Gan Eden. You were in the land of Eden. You were the anointed cherub that covered Adam and Eve, because you were the primary chief messenger, and you were perfect in your creation until iniquity was found in you. Would you like to argue that the Garden of Eden was not on the Kadosh mountain of Yahweh? Would anyone like to argue? Have at it. Can't argue. It says Satan was in the Kadosh mountain, which is not another mountain. It is the mountain of Elohim, Yahweh, in the land of Eden. So that the Garden of Eden was on the mountain of Elohim. And this, I'm just getting started. I'm going to give you so much proof that you're going to ask me to make a documentary.
Praise God.
His story. His story channel. Todah Rabba Yahweh. Place you upon the Kadosh mountain of Elohim. And S.A. You used to walk up and down that mountain in the midst of the stones of fire. What are the stones of fire? Those were the altars on the mount. The altars of the Temple Mount. I placed you there. You were on the holy mountain of Yahweh. The holy mountain of Yahweh is Mount Moriah, Har Moriah in Yerushalayim. Today Mount Moriah forms the remnants of the Temple Mount. Yahweh selected Mount Moriah as the site of his future dwelling and temple. Therefore the Holy Scriptures connects Yerushalayim with the original site of Gan Eden. Can you see that? Oh, say, can you see? Can you see that? That was the original site of Gan Eden. It was the mountain of Elohim. It was none other. It wasn't in Babylon, in between the Tigris and the Euphrates. No. No, it was the Kadosh mountain of Elohim. That's where it was. Baruch Hashem. It was the Temple Mount from where Adam was taken from the dust, where the Garden of Eden was. And in this intersection of the Temple Mount, what would become the Temple Mount, you will find the Etz Chaim, the tree of life. We sing about it every Shabbat, don't we? Etz Chaim, that's where the tree of life was, on the Temple Mount. Revelation 2:7. Go with me to Gilyanan. Gilyanan 2:7. Oh boy, we're going for a ride today. Baruch Hashem Yahweh. This is the cyclone, baby. This is the cyclone at Coney Island, big time. Gilyanan 2:7. The bad news is we're not as packed as we should be. The good news is I preach better in front of smaller crowds. He that has an ear, let him hear what the Ruach says to the Israelite congregations. To him that overcomes this world, I will give to eat of the Etz Chaim, the tree of life, which is in the midst of the Gan Eden of Eloha. So the tree of life was in the midst of Gan Eden. And we can eat from that same tree in the garden. Now go back to Bereshit, Genesis 2:9. Is anyone enjoying?
Amen. Hallelujah.
Out of the ground made Yahweh Elohim to grow every etz, every tree that is pleasant to the sight, tov for food. The Etz Chaim also was in the midst of the garden, and the tree, the etz of the da'at, the knowledge of tov, good and evil. Yahweh made the tree of life grow out of the ground. Do you see that, verse 9? I said, do you see that? Yahweh made the tree of life grow out of the ground. See that? Verse 9. We call that in Hebrew, out of the ground, zemiha. A tree that grows out of the ground is called zemiha. Straight out of the ground. Zemiha. Which meant that the planting of the tree had not been done in the soil of the Garden of Eden, but was planted in the Garden of Eden by Yahweh. It didn't spring up. The same way Yahweh took Adam from the Temple Mount, or the dust of the Temple Mount, the same way the tree of life did not grow from the Garden of Eden. The tree of life was put there by Yahweh.
Come on.
Amen.
Because the Hebrew word semilah means it was a planting that was done elsewhere, but transplanted into the garden. But the other trees grew out of the garden. But the tree of life was transplanted from another location into the garden. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The tree of life was implanted. This concept of transplanting of the tree of life is highly significant. For it will tie you into another profound possibility that a branch from this tree could be successfully transplanted later on for an even more important reason. Now again, I'm not trying to take credit for this. A lot of what I'm going to share, I've been sharing for many years under many different messages. You've heard me share it before, many of you that have been here, that have been stuck with me for a long time. However, a lot of these things that I'm putting together today come from Rabbi Rob Miller, who sent this out on the internet, and so he kind of put it all together for me, and the Ruach HaKodesh snapped me right into that moment and said, now go ahead and use Rabbi Miller's teaching. So when someone puts an article on the internet, it becomes public domain, meaning my teachings can be used by other teachers, And I can use the teachings of other teachers, and they can use my teachings, and trust me, they do. So it's public domain. So I don't want to take credit for something. This is Yahweh's word. Yahweh gets the credit.
Amen.
But I am using some of Rabbi Miller's excellent notes on this situation. Todah Rabbi Yahweh.
Baruch Hashem, Yahweh.
Amen. The tree of life, as I said earlier, was implanted. Now, or transplanted, and later you will understand why this is so significant. So, where are we now? The tree of life did not grow out of the Temple Mount, but rather it was what? Planted there by Yahweh, correct? Now this is going to come back, just like the Afikoman comes back at the end of Passover. You've got to remember this, because this thing is going to come back on a very powerful way. Baruch Hashem Yahweh. An essential clue relating to the tree of life is found in the earliest known name for Mount Moriah, the city of Luz. Where do we remember that term, Britt? Where have we heard that term, Luz, L-U-Z? It means almond tree in Aramaic, in Arabic, and Ethiopic. I'll say it again. The word Luz means almond tree in Aramaic, Arabic, and Ethiopic. According to a book called Torah Anthology, the city of Luz was associated with an immense olive tree of life. Hello? The almond olive tree of life that didn't grow out of the garden, but Yahweh transplanted it or planted it in the garden because he took it somewhere else. I believe he might have taken it from heaven and stuck it in there. Just like he took Adam out of the dust of the Temple Mount, because it says, Satan, you were in the Garden of Eden. Where was the Garden of Eden? On my Kadosh mountain, the mountain of Elohim. Ezekiel 28, 13, and 14. Guessing is over. It's not somewhere between the Euphrates and the Tigris. It's exactly where Ezekiel said it was. It's not in the Fertile Crescent. It's where Yahweh's presence walked with Adam Bechava in the cool of the day. Baruch Hashem Yahweh. That's where it was. And that's where it is. That's where it remains. Let's go to Bereshit 28:19. I'm enjoying. I'm enjoying so much that I have to curve this into several parts. Bereshit 28:19. Bereshit 28:19. Speaking of our forefather Yaakov, Jacob, he called the name of the place where he wrestled with a man. We know the man was a theophany of Yeshua, a pre-incarnate appearance of Yeshua. Verse 19, he called the name of the place House of El. Bethel means House of El. But before it became the House of El, before it became the Temple Mount, it was called Luz. We know again that Luz means tree, almond tree in Aramaic, in Arabic, and in Ethiopic. So think about that. So Luz, or Bethel, the house of El. What's another way to say the house of El? Yerushalayim. The house of Elohim in Yerushalayim used to be called Luz, which in Spanish, interestingly, is light. Why not? Yahweh's light is on the Temple Mount, the Garden of Eden that became the temple where the Holy of Holies was. Meaning Adam was made from the dirt, what became the Holy of Holies. That's the dirt that Adam was taken out of. Baruch Hashem Yahweh. I said Baruch Hashem Yahweh. And Yaakov called the name of that place Bethel. But before it was Bethel, it had been the city of Luz. Let me ask you a question. Why did Jacob call Luz Bethel? Why did he rename it Bethel? Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, this is why, because Mount Moriah in Jerusalem was the place where Jacob went to sleep, and the presence of Yahweh, Yeshua, was wrestling with him right there on the Garden of Eden, what became the Temple Mount. Jacob went to sleep on the Temple Mount, the previous Garden of Eden, It was the place of the almond tree. Luz. What does luz mean? The almond tree. It was the place of the almond tree, but Jacob wrestled with Yeshua, the pre-incarnate Yeshua, in a theophany, and he changed the name to Bethel. Because Bethel was on the mountain of Yahweh, where the Garden of Eden was, where Satan was. Man, I'm done. I'm excited about this message. Glad you're hot now? It's worth being hot for the right thing, for the right reason. I wouldn't be hot at a Dolphin game. I'd go home and put the AC on. But we're hot for the good stuff. Tadarabah Yahweh. So Jacob called the place the house of Elohim, because Jacob knew that that would become the Temple Mount Moriah in Yerushalayim, the very site of Yaakov's dream. In Genesis 28 and verse 19. Jacob's ladder, look, verse 12. I'm not going to get in there all the time. Bereshit 28:12. Bereshit 28:12. He dreamed a ladder was set up on earth and it reached to the heavens. And the heavenly Melachim of Elohim were ascending and descending. Why? Because that ladder was the connection between Zion and the Garden of Eden. That ladder connected Yahweh's presence from heaven right to the Holy of Holies, or before it was the Holy of Holies, the Garden of Eden. That ladder that he saw on Melachim ascending and descending was symbolic that that's where Yahweh's presence wouldn't go in and out, in and out, in and out. Yahweh's presence would go up and down, from up, down to walk with Adam v'Chava in the cool of the day. Somebody talk to me while I give my glasses a good rub. That's what Jacob's ladder was all about. Yahweh was showing you the place of the Garden of Eden. He was pointing to the place that would later become the Kadosh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. Oh, Baruch Hashem. But wait! Stop right there. I want to know right now before we go any further. Do you love me? Do you keep my commandments? Now wait, now listen. I'm not Meatloaf, so listen. Bereshit 28:19. And Jacob named the place Bethel. But the mountain opposite Mount Moriah, Bethel, the mountain of Elohim, the Garden of Eden, where the Spirit walked with Adam v'Chava, the mountain opposite Moriah, directly to the east of Mount Moriah, those of you who have been to Israel know this, is Har HaZeitim, the Mount of Olives, where Yeshua died and was buried. And I'm going to prove it so much that those of you who are mystified will be mystified no more. Baruch Hashem, Yahweh. Tudarabah. Now, where was the inner sanctuary? On Mount Moriah, where the Garden of Eden was originally. Bethel used to be called the city of the almond tree. Let me ask you a question. You see where I'm going with this? If you don't, I'm going to zock you with a pitcher of water. The tree of life was in the city of Luz. Before it became the house of Yahweh, it was known as the city of Luz. And what does Luz mean? Almond tree. Tree of life. Almond tree. Do you see where I'm going with this thing? Tadarabah Yahweh. But opposite Mount Moriah was the outer courts of the Garden of Eden. On the other side of the Kidron Valley, the second section, or the remainder of the garden, that separated the garden from the rest of Eden, lie on the Mount of Olives. This section correlates to the holies, and then the rest of Eden with the court. Okay. So the second section, the outer part of the Garden of Eden, separated from the inner part of the Garden of Eden, became known as the what? Makom Kadosh, or the holy place, as opposed to the Holy of Holies. So the Garden of Eden had an inner court, where Yahweh's Ruach was, his Shekhinah. Then it had an outer court, which became the Makom Kadosh, the outer court. But then there was a third altar. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Todah Rabba Yahweh. So the second section was the outer remainder, separated the garden from the rest of Eden. Now when Adam fell, what happened when Adam fell? I'm sick and tired of Jewish people telling me, well, that's a Christian thing. We don't believe in the fall of Adam and Eve. Really? Well, last time I checked, Genesis was in the Old Testament, not in the Book of Mormon. So next time you run into a Jewish person, oh, that doctrine of original sin, we don't subscribe to that. That's not Jewish. That's something that Christians believe in. We don't believe in original sin. Say, Rabbi, in all due respect, you lie. Because Genesis is in your Torah. That is original. Why is it original? He was the first to do it.
Amen.
That makes it original.
Yep.
I don't care what the Christians call it. That dude was the first to do it. So it's got to be original.
You gotta be. Yes, sir.
Todah Rabba Yahweh.
Yahweh.
That's original. Now, when Adam fell, he was expelled from the garden, but he was allowed to live in Eden. Notice, I'm going to talk about that in a second. When Adam was expelled from the garden, Yahweh gave a branch of the tree of life to Adam. The branch of the tree of life was engraved with the ineffable name of Yud He Vav He, Yahweh. He gave a branch to Adam. He didn't kick Adam out of Eden. He kicked Adam out of the garden, but he lived the rest of his days in the land of Eden.
Yahweh, wow.
Wow.
You really think Yahweh would kick Adam and Eve to Babylon? Or to Iran?
No.
Or to Kurdistan? Or Pakistan? Or Shmurdistan? Or your uncle and mama stand? He kept them in the land of Eden, but not in the direct presence. The Shekhinah was gone. He didn't walk in the inner sanctum, which later became the Holy of Holies. Todah Rabba Yahweh. Now, how can I prove it? Of course I can prove it. Go to Bereshit 3:24. He kicked Adam out of the garden, but not Eden. Verse 23. Bereshit 3:23. So therefore Yahweh Elohim sent Adam out of the garden, Gan Eden, to work the ground from where he was taken. He was still working the land of Eden, but not in the garden. He drove the man outside the camp, notice, and then he placed in the east of the garden, cherubim, cherubs, flaming sword east, circle that word east, that turned in every direction to guard the way back to the Etz Chaim. So what happened? Yahweh kicked them off the Temple Mount, what would later become the Temple Mount, across the Kidron Valley to work the garden from the land of Eden from which he was taken. Because he was taken from where? He was taken from the Temple Mount, wasn't it? And so he was called to work in Eden, but outside the garden. And Yahweh put flaming cherubim, or flaming angels, to protect the way so Adam and Eve could not return to the garden. They'd have to live out the rest of their days and die in Eden, but could never return to the garden.
Amen. Wow.
Todah Rabba Yahweh. But Yahweh gave Adam a branch that was engraved with the ineffable name of Yahweh. How do we know that? From Sefer Yashar and many other sources. Now, according to Torah Anthology, written by Yaakov Kuli, one of the great Sephardic sages of his time, published in 1730, listen. Adam constructed the first altar to Yahweh outside the garden. Why did he construct an altar to Yahweh outside the garden? Because he was thrown out of the garden. Doesn't that make sense? Adam constructed the first altar to Yahweh to worship Yahweh, because he was a worshiper of Yahweh outside the garden, because he was thrown off the Temple Mount. He could no longer return to the garden from whence he was taken. Ezekiel 28:13 says, Satan, you were in the garden on the Kadosh mountain of Yahweh. And Jacob said, this is Bethel. It was formerly the place of the almond tree. What almond tree? The almond tree that was the original tree of life.
Yes.
It used to be loose before it became the house of Elohim. Later on, by the time of Yeshua, of course, it had become the house of Elohim. But before it was the house of Elohim, it was the place of the almond tree. But see, our sages tell us in the book of Jasher tells us that Adam took a branch from that almond tree and took it with him to the land of Eden, or the Mount of Olives. Yeah. I love this, yeah. I love it. Notice. So Adam was expelled east of the garden. Yahweh put the cheruvim on the eastern gate of the garden. Did you get that? Where did Yahweh put the cheruvim? On the eastern gate of the garden. To prevent Adam and Chava returning without the redemption that Yahweh would provide. The tree of life was on Mount Moriah. Adam was expelled east. And he built the first altar to worship Yahweh on the Mount of Olives. This is the same altar. Now, I'm going to blow you away now. You ever wonder how Cain... Remember, can we talk?
Go ahead.
Remember the word of Yahweh in Genesis 4:1-2 came to Cain and Abel to come up with an appointed time and an appointed sacrifice. And Abel brought the firstlings and the best of his flock. And what did Cain bring? A veggie burger. Cain brought a vegetable sacrifice. And Yahweh said, out! I don't want veggies. I want to see the blood of the Lamb that points to Yeshua, the way and the means by which I will save the world. Away with the veggies. Not that Yahweh's against vegetarianism, but that was not the method. Yahweh didn't save us with cucumbers and leeks and garlic. He saved us with the blood of the Lamb. Yahweh don't leak, honey. Yahweh bleeds. So Adam built the altar that was rebuilt by Abel and rebuilt by Noah. How do I know? Go to Bereshit 4:4. I'll show you. Bereshit 4:4. Oh, hallelujah. And Hevel, Abel, pardon me, brought the bechorot of his flock, the firstlings, and its fat. And Yahweh had respect for Hevel and his offering. But to Cain and his offering, Yahweh had no respect. And Cain was very angry, and his face displayed hate. That word therefore, notice, that altar there, in verse 4, is the same altar that Adam built. Well, how did Cain and Abel know what altar to use? Their father built it when he was banished from the garden and had to work the land of Eden. Todah Rabah Yahweh. What I really meant was Todah Rabah Yahweh. So, we see there, and then we see in Genesis 8:20, Bereshit 8:20, and all of a sudden Noah comes along and builds an altar to Yahweh. And Noah took of every clean beast and every clean fowl and offered up burnt offerings on the altar. That was the same altar Noah used, that was the same altar that Cain and Abel used, that was the same altar that Adam originally built. Because remember, Yahweh never changes, does he? And Yahweh always wanted to be worshipped from the house of Elohim by mankind. But man could not enter the Holy of, or would later become the Holy of Holies, because man was banished from the garden. He dwelt in the land of Eden, so that somehow Yahweh allowed an altar in the land of Eden to become the main focal point of Yahwistic worship. Are you getting this? Because he wouldn't let Adam and Chava return to the Temple Mount, because that was the garden. So they had to establish another altar with which to worship Yahweh. It was that altar, the altar of Cain and Abel, built by Abraham, rebuilt by Noah, and later rebuilt by Abraham when he was going to slay his son Yitzchak in Genesis 22. Every theologian you've ever come across has told you that that sacrifice was going to